Uncovering the Cursed Secrets. Sinister human experiments by the Vatican exposed during WWII. Sarah Mackenzie thought a new start was just what her family needed, but she never anticipated the darkness waiting beneath the surface of her peaceful suburban life. The tranquility of her new surroundings in Ohio turned deceivingly casual as dusk swept across the neighborhood. Every evening, as she tucked her 2 children into bed, an inexplicable chill settled in, thickening the air with a sense of being watched. Shadows danced through her yard, twisting into grotesque shapes that clawed at her insides. One stormy night, seeking some forgotten treasures in the attic, Sarah stumbled upon an ancient, locked trunk. The curiosity gnawed at her, pulling her closer until her heart raced. As she pried it open, a wave of stale air whirled out, carrying the musty smell of lost memories. Inside lay chilling photographs and yellowed documents connected to the previous occupants, an ordinary family whose lives had creased into a fatal curve during World War II. The deeper she dug, the more her blood ran cold. Among the mementos, a disturbing revelation emerged. The father had conducted sinister experiments sanctioned by the Vatican, turning their home into a grotesque laboratory, with innocent civilians as unwitting subjects. Each carefully penned note and haunting photograph piled the weight of fear onto her shoulders. Was this evil lingering in her house? Before she could catch her breath, reality smashed against her like a brick wall. Someone had to know about this darkness. In her determination, she approached neighbors to discuss her findings. The initial warmth in their smiles turned icy, their gazes hard. They were no longer friendly faces but a wall of silence, venomous whispers circling just out of earshot. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Despite her fear, Sarah plunged deeper. The charming suburb masked a sinister history like a predator hiding in the tall grass. Whispers of past grudges floated in the air, smothering her spirit. When one night Sarah awoke to her youngest standing at the front door, frozen and grinning in a way only a horror movie villain could, dread wrapped its hands around her throat. The innocent gaze reflected something not of this world. Seeking clarity, she approached local authorities, only to face a deriding officer who dismissed her pleas. It was like her words dissolved into the air, leaving behind nothing but doubt. The more she uncovered, the stronger the feeling grew that this tight-knit community was hiding something beyond their pristine lawns. A respected community leader, a man she had admired, now stood on the edge of her suspicions. Why did his past hold such sway over the present? As night closed in, the walls began to feel alive, breathing, shadows creeping in around her like spirits anxious for her attention. The clock was ticking, and the ancient curse beckoned, hungry for souls. Sarah could no longer ignore it. She needed to protect her children, to break free from this spiraling nightmare before the darkness consumed them all. But as fear eroded her sanity, she was left wondering who would stop the past from claiming its due. The air felt heavier as Sarah descended from the attic, clutching the documents to her chest like a shield. Every crinkle of the paper echoed secrets she couldn't comprehend, yet the weight of them pressed against her heart, drawing her into an abyss of panic. She steeled herself, thinking of her children. They deserved safety, they deserved more than this house drenched in shadows. But as she glanced down the darkened hallway, it seemed to hesitate, whispering shadows undulating along the walls, mischievous shapes that followed her like a pack of wolves. She shuddered, her breath turning shallow. Eating away at her resolve, her mind raced with images of the Father's experiments. What had they done here? It felt almost as if she could hear the echo of their screams, desperate pleas muffled under layers of time and guilt. Did her neighbors know? Were they participants in this dreadful secret? As she approached the kitchen, a rhythmic thud echoed from behind the door leading to the basement. Her instincts screamed at her to ignore it. But denial had withered her courage. With trembling hands, she reached for the handle, the cold brass burning her skin as she twisted it, The door creaked open, revealing the darkened stairs. A musty scent wafted up, a mix of rot and fear. She hesitated, heart pounding like a war drum. The thudding noise grew fainter, swallowed by the silence below. Should she venture further? Goosebumps rippled along her skin as she descended into the darkness, clutching at the railing to steady herself. "Mommy?" A voice called to her, soft and innocent, yet hauntingly out of place. It was her son. "Mommy, please don't come down here." Her breath hitched. "Jimmy? What are you doing down there?" "I don't want you to see." The voice trembled, cloaked in fear. It wasn't he right? A feeling in her gut twisted her stomach. "Where are you?" Fear twisted into desperation. She pushed herself deeper into the oppressive gloom, her heart racing. The breaths that followed were slow and deliberate, creeping through the darkness like something alive and hungry. As she stepped off the last stair, a flicker of light caught her eye. A small lantern dimly illuminated the room, casting eerie shadows against the cement walls. It felt wrong as her gaze landed on a table in the corner, cluttered with jars filled with unknown substances, each creating a different chilling story of pain and torment. Her pulse quickened. It was here, this was it, proof of their nightmare. But her son was still lost in the shadows. "Please don't come any closer," he whimpered, his voice cracking. "What is happening?" The desperation in her voice echoed, mingling with the oppressive air. She scanned the room, but he was nowhere to be seen, hidden among the dark corners, the remnants of forgotten terrors creeping closer. "I don't want it to take you too." At that moment, shadows surged around her, gripping at her ankles and rising to her knees. Each whisper, a ghost from the past, clawed at her sanity. The air thickened, hot and suffocating. "Jimmy, don't," she started, the words choking in her throat as she felt the very walls of the basement close in around her. The last flicker of light seemed to flicker and die, plunging her into darkness. But not all was dark. Her eyes adjusted, and caught the glimmer of movement. A figure lurked just beyond the edge, its presence felt more than seen, a weight in the air that promised endless dread. Suddenly, a cold whisper sent shivers down her spine. "You can't escape the past, Sarah." With a surge of adrenaline, she turned and bolted back toward the stairs as the darkness writhed and reached out, fingers of shadow eager to grasp her. She couldn't let it take her children, not now. She rushed back upstairs, panting, her heart racing so violently she feared it might burst. Fearing the whispers that had multiplied, promising shadows of her family impending doom, she needed answers. Who or what was haunting her family, and why? As she flung open the door and stepped into the living room, horror painted on her face, an unseen force slammed it shut behind her. She staggered back, gasping. The house began to moan as if it were alive, summoning a storm of memories that begged to be released. In that moment, she realized the truth. The real danger was closer than she dared imagine. But as the walls pressed closer, she felt the message reverberate through her bones. She had awakened something in the dark. Something that wanted back what they had taken from it. In that moment, she knew the quest for safety would become a race against time. What price would she pay to save her family? As shadows pulsed and shadows whispered her name, one thing was certain: the past would not stay buried. Would she find the strength to face what was coming, or would she succumb to the horrors of those who once lived inside these walls? The house exhaled a long, low groan, each creak and moan permeating the thick air and setting Sarah on edge. Panic blazed through her veins with an intensity that could drown even the sharpest fear. She pressed her back against the door, her breath harsh, as she tried to collect her racing thoughts. Whatever had just happened, whatever had stirred in the shadows, it wasn't done with her yet. "Mommy," Jimmy's voice fractured the silence, an echo from the depths of despair. "Please, no, you need to leave." "Leave? Leave where?" She searched for him, her heart hammering in her chest, a relentless drumbeat of dread that threatened to overpower her senses. The darkness of the living room felt oppressive, threadbare, memories of her past's impending doom wrapping tighter around her like a noose. The very walls pulsed with a malevolent energy, bending reality in ways she never thought possible. "Mommy!" His voice rose, shrill and breaking. In that moment, she couldn't distinguish between a call for help and a warning. Fear twisted into a tangible entity, mocking her, as she stepped away from the door. As if in response to her defiance, the house shuddered violently. The lights flickered, illuminating grotesque shadows that danced against the walls, phantoms from another time, souls trapped in torment. The air trembled with a buzzing energy that felt both alive and dead at once, a grotesque harmony of anguish and malice. "Jimmy!" she shouted, breaking through the choking fog that filled her lungs. "Where are you? Speak to me!" Silence swallowed her words, stretching unnaturally, and dread wrapped around her like a vice. Her fingers trembled as she moved towards the front window, a glimpse of safety just on the other side. She could see the neighborhood bathed in moonlight, tranquil and deceptively serene, but the tremors of the house pulled her focus back. She knew she needed to get to her son, yet something deep inside her warned to stay away from the shadows cast by her own home. Suddenly, the lantern she'd left behind flickered back to life, filling the room with a sickly glow. But the light did more than brighten the space. It unveiled a grotesque tableau. Jars that once held memories stood neatly on the table, each containing twisted remnants of human lives that should have remained untouched. The sight turned her stomach, yet she was drawn to it, forced to battle through the chaotic pull of the shadows wanting to claim not just her, but her entire family. Just as she was about to turn away, something shifted in the corner of the dim light. Her breath caught. There, in the farthest reach of illumination, stood a figure slight and trembling. A mix of hope and terror surged within her. Could it be Jimmy? Mommy, the figure was no longer just a silhouette. It was him. But he didn't look right. A strange shimmer enveloped him, his features shifting in and out of focus, caught between the living and something beyond. "Jimmy!" she cried out again, but the word felt futile, swallowed by darkness. "Please don't come closer." The warning trembled from his lips, resonating with an urgency that sent chills racing through her. Panic set in. "I'm here! I'm coming to you!" She reached for him, desperate, but as she moved forward, the shadows around her stirred, hungry and aware. They conspired to hold her back, wrapping around her ankles like icy hands. Panic surged as she fought against their grip, yanking herself forward. The air thickened around her, oppressive and vile, whispering threats, secrets worse than her nightmares. "You had to remember, Sarah." You awakened it in that moment. Realization hit her like a punch to the gut. The past wouldn't just watch. It would drag her into its chaos if she didn't act. But as she tore her gaze away from the figure that might not even be her son, a new horror unfurled from the shadows. A sudden crash echoed above, snapping her thoughts. The floorboards overhead creaked ominously, a voice echoing from the second floor, a chilling laugh that was unmistakably familiar. "Sarah, you thought you could escape?" Frozen in terror, she felt the shadows circle tighter, as the whispers grew louder, a cacophony that resonated with her deepest fears. She had to decide either to confront the apparition in the light, or delve deeper into the darkness around her. "Mommy! Help me!" With a final surge of defiance, she tore herself away from the shadows clawing at her feet and raced toward the stairs, determined to uncover what lay hidden within the torment if it was even her son left to save. With the walls crying out for her to succumb to the past, she understood something vital. The past wasn't done with her. No, it had every intention to reclaim everything she held dear. What awaited her at the top was a choice that would determine not just her fate, but the fate of all she loved. Will she uncover the horrifying truth of her lineage, or will the dark past consume her and her family whole? The stairs creaked under Sarah's hurried steps, each echoing thud adding weight to the tension coiling in her gut. She could still hear Jimmy's voice, a fragile thread pulling her toward the darkness above. Shadows loomed, twisting and writhing as if they were alive, coaxing her to turn back. But retreat wasn't an option. Not now. As she ascended, the temperature dropped drastically, an icy breath settling over her skin. Goosebumps prickled along her arms, and she swiped at her hair, trying to clear the mist forming around her thoughts. The upper hallway stretched out before her, shrouded in a thick fog. Dim shapes flitted in and out of her vision, and a shiver danced down her spine. "Jimmy!" She yelled again, her voice a whip crack in the heavy silence. No response, just the echo of her fear. Each step felt like it carried her deeper into a nightmare. The door to his room stood ajar, a sinister invitation inviting her to disturb what might already be far too disturbing. "Mommy! Please hurry!" His voice broke through again, this time soaked in pure desperation. A nauseating dread clawed at her insides as she stepped forward, pushing the door open wider. The room was wrecked, furniture overturned, as if a storm had blown through. A dark shape huddled in the corner, the outline of a small figure. Her heart raced. "Jimmy!" she gasped, running closer. But as she approached, the figure flinched and shrank away from her, eyes wide with terror. "Don't! It's not me!" he cried out, his voice distorted, overlapping with another a deeper, sinister timbre that sent a chill spiraling through her. "What do you mean?" Panic surged. This wasn't he right. He was in there, and yet something else lurked within. Suddenly, the walls rattled, a low growl reverberating through the room, swirling like smoke around them. The shadows poured from the corners, thickening into a dark liquid, pressing in on all sides. Sarah stumbled back, her breath hitched, feeling the very air turn agonizingly dense. "Mommy!" Then he appeared, figures of men, all dressed like priests, flickering into view on the periphery of the room, their eyes sunken and empty. She felt the bile rise in her throat as their whispers filled the air, ancient and unspeakable. They pointed toward her, their faces grim, as shadows twisted and flickered around them like flames feeding on the dark. "You are of her flesh," one hissed, a voice commanding yet dripping with malice. "You cannot escape what has been set into motion." Confusion wrapped around her thoughts, tightening until they began to fray. What had she done? A part of her desperately wanted to run, to break free of the suffocating grip of this fate. But the wall of shadows pushed her back, and she knew there was only one path forward: confront the horror, whatever it was. "Leave my son alone!" she screamed, frustration boiling over. But the silence that answered her was shattering. The shadows surged, feeding on her fear, each cold finger pulling her deeper into the room's grasp. She could feel it, something rising within her, clawing to be unleashed. "Mommy!" Then Jimmy was gone, swallowed by a void that roared with fury. In one desperate moment, a memory flickered through her mind, a fleeting image of her mother buried beneath layers of secrets and guilt. She had kept the truth hidden, yet here it was, unraveling in the very air around her. "Face it! Face your legacy!" The shadows barked, their voices twisting into shrieks that pierced through her resolve. With a surge of strength, she ripped herself free of the amorphous tendrils binding her and lunged for his voice, sensing the faint remnants of hope amongst the raging chaos. The house shook as she pushed through, ready to confront whatever wickedness had been unleashed. But another crash echoed, louder and more violent, shaking the very foundation. "Sarah!" It was a deeper voice this time. Familiar yet horrid. And from the depths of the room, something began to coalesce, a dark figure rising, foreshadowing something unspeakable and twisted. What horrors were waiting? Would she find her son in time, or was she destined to carry the weight of the past alone? The darkness around Sarah thickened, wrapping her in a shroud of dread. She stumbled forward, heart racing like a caged animal. The twisted figure looming before her pulsated, shadows curling around it like serpents, hungering for her fear. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, yet her legs betrayed her, rooted in place as the figure solidified. "Sarah!" The voice was chilling, a grotesque mimicry of her son's. It slithered through her mind, chilling her bones. The flickering form melted into definition, a ghastly apparition wearing her son's face, yet grotesquely altered. "Where's Jimmy?" she gasped, terror squeezing her throat. "Here with me," it hissed, the words dragging like magnets scraping against metal. As if summoned by its words, the shadows surged, coalescing into a mass so dark it drank the light, forming a maze of twisted faces, all watching, waiting. Their hollow eyes shone, ancient and knowing, and in their gaze she felt the weight of forgotten histories and unspeakable horrors. "Your mother knew," the apparition urged, its features distorting. "She kept the truth buried. But you had pointed a shadowy claw toward her. You cannot escape. You're lying! She shouted, her voice trembling. The words spilled out raw and desperate. Each syllable seemed to fight against the binding shadows, yet they only tightened their grip. You're not him! The figure's laughter echoed, a chaotic mingling of her son's innocence entwined with something deeper, darker. Do you think you can break the cycle? It's already begun. The walls closed in, shrinking the space around her. A sudden flash of memory incapacitated her images of her mother, kneeling in secret, buried in whispered prayers that tasted of betrayal. Each heartbeat prompted another surge of dread as she recalled the stories, the unspoken terrors wrapped tightly in her family's history. No! Sarah screamed, abandoning rational thought, fueled only by the immediate need to save her child. She lunged, arms reaching for the apparition, but just before she made contact, it evaporated into smoke, spiraling away like a nightmarish mist. Find the key! It shrieked, its voice stretching and twisting as it dissipated. It's hidden in the dark. The house trembled in response, shadows writhing around her. She blinked hard, trying to clear the dizzying confusion creeping through her mind. In her heart, duality brewed, a shred of hope precariously balanced against despair. Jimmy! She cried, her voice barely above a whisper, swallowed by the ever-thickening darkness. With renewed determination, she surveyed the chaos before her, the wreckage of her childhood clashing with the terror wanting to ensnare her. As the low growls echoed through the room, she spotted a dull glow flickering in the corner. An object jutted from beneath a pile of debris, a small brass key, shimmering as if beckoning her. Was it a trap? Or perhaps a lifeline? The questions crowded her mind, each one more urgent than the last. With a shaky breath, she dove for the key, nearly slipping on the dust and shredded remnants of her past. As her fingers closed around the cool metal, darkness swelled around her, creeping along the floor, licking greedily at her heels. Unlock the truth! The whispers crescendoed, filling her head with confusion, drowning out everything else. In that moment, she felt the weight of history crashing down, all the untold secrets that threatened to engulf her. Her mother's choices, the sins of the past, and now her own fate. What would the key unlock? And would she dare test its power at the risk of unleashing something even more horrific? The shadows writhed in anticipation. Stay strong, Jimmy, Sarah whispered, clutching the key tightly. The next choice she made would be the most terrifying of all. Would she unearth the truth, or would she delve deeper into the abyss of her family's dark legacy? Before she could answer, another crash split the silence, shaking the house once more. Sarah! The call was louder, frantic. But this time the voice was not her son's. Who was calling for her? Would her reckoning with the shadows grant her the power to protect her child, or was she doomed to repeat the sins of her past? Sarah! The voice pierced through her, sharp as glass. She knew that voice. It belonged to her mother, the very source of her pain, her secrets, and now, perhaps, her salvation or her doom. The shadows around her stirred violently, each whisper growing louder, a chaotic chorus of malicious intent. Mom? She breathed out, bewildered. The darkness thickened, coiling tighter, almost suffocating. The key in her hand felt heavier now, as if it were absorbing the weight of her despair. She needed to move, to act, but the shadows hummed with anticipation, threatening to strip away her resolve. Find me! Her mother's voice echoed, distant yet close, tinged with urgency. You must face it, Sarah. Panic clenched her gut. What did that mean? It? What haunted her family's history? A part of her wanted to turn and flee, to leave this cursed house to protect herself and her child from the horrors that lurked in the dark. But her feet remained nailed to the floor, a giant invisible hand gripping her tight. Mom! She shouted, desperation seeping into her voice. Where are you? The darkness roared in response, a fierce gale of muted whispers swirling around her, as if the shadows themselves were growing restless with her cries. Another loud crash reverberated through the decaying walls. She could hear it now, something heavy scraping against wood, a clawing sound that sent shivers racing down her spine. Get the key, Sarah! Her mother's voice insisted, fiercer now, urging her forward. In a sudden clump of courage, Sarah bolted toward the back of the house, though every step felt as if she were running in molasses. The air grew colder, and dread wrapped tighter around her throat. The back room was dark, almost more than her eyes could bear. Something flickered in the corner, a reflection of light betrayed her senses, revealing an old mirror shattered into jagged pieces. Was it a reflection of her soul she saw amidst the shards? With trembling fingers, she picked one up, the sharp edge glinting ominously against the dim light. Truth lies within, echoed a disembodied voice from somewhere deep within the shadows. It hit her, the key. She needed to unlock whatever was buried in this dreadful house, chained by years of silence and fear. What had her mother known? What darkness had she tried to shield her from? Sweat formed a thin veil across her brow as she gripped the key in one hand and the shard of mirror in the other. She glanced back, half expecting to see the apparitional figure lingering in the shadows, waiting for its moment to pounce. "Sarah, hurry!" The urgency in her mother's voice intensified, reverberating through the very walls of the house. "Before it's too late!" She pushed on, her heart pounding, each beat echoing in her ears like a war drum. A door loomed ahead, cloaked in shadows. Mustering every ounce of strength, she approached. Could the key unlock this door? What lay on the other side? Silence settled, thick and suffocating. She could feel the shadows closing in, thick tendrils curling around her ankles, a chilling reminder of the horrors that clung to her family. She raised the brass key, a fragile lifeline against inevitable despair. "Unlock it!" The demand urged her forward, spurring her on as terror clawed at her insides. She stepped closer, the key quivering in her hand, as if it were alive, sensing the turmoil surrounding her. Would she shatter the past? Or would she become another lost soul, doomed to roam this darkness forever? Taking a deep breath, she pressed the key against the door's rusty lock. The sound of the key turning echoed loudly in the oppressive silence. What awaited her behind that door could save her son or condemn them both. But she had no choice, she had to know. All at once, the house recoiled, groaning under the weight of dread and anticipation. And as the door creaked open, a foul wind swept past her, carrying distant whispers laced with malevolence. Sarah, was that Jimmy? She couldn't tell. Shadows coiled around her with renewed fury, shadows that thrummed with ancient terror. Face the darkness, they hissed, or be consumed by it, and as she crossed the threshold, the house shuddered violently behind her. What lay waiting in that room? Was it the truth, a salvation, or something far more sinister? She had to find out before it was too late. The moment the door swung open, the air shifted. A cold blast wrapped around her like a vice, piercing through her clothes and sinking into her skin. Sarah stumbled into the room, her breath hitching at the sight that greeted her. Dim light spilled from an aged lamp in the corner, barely illuminating tattered walls covered in peeling wallpaper that seemed to whisper her demise. "Mom!" She called out again, the desperation in her voice echoing off the walls, yet met with silence. The room was filled with remnants of a long-forgotten past. Old photographs adorned the walls, faces frozen in time, their eyes following her every move. She felt the weight of their stares, a chorus of lost souls trapped in this accursed space. Among the clutter, a desk dominated the room, cluttered with yellowing papers, glass speakers, and rusty instruments that seemed to glisten with a malevolent hunger. She approached the desk, her heart pounding louder than ever. The musty scent of old wood mingled with something more acrid, something that made her stomach churn. Her gaze landed on a journal, its leather cover cracked and aged. "The truth lies within," she murmured, her fingers itching to pry it open. Suddenly, a noise shattered the stillness, a low growl resonating from the corner of the room. Sarah whipped around, pulse racing as darkness poured into view, taking on a form. A figure cloaked in shadows emerged, its face obscured, but a set of glowing eyes pierced through the murkiness, locking onto her. Fear gripped her. Heart racing, she clutched the shard of glass tightly, a fragile weapon against whatever monstrosity lurked in the gloom. "Sarah," the figure rasped, each syllable dripping with malice. "What brings you here?" "Leave me alone!" she screamed, but the words slipped from her lips in a quivering tremble. Do you really think you can escape? The darkness swirled around the figure, twisting like smoke. You seek answers, but you may find more than you bargained for. The shadows around her thickened, tugging at her like greedy hands. Panic surged, and she turned toward the journal, desperate for clarity, for a way to confront the horror that had shackled her family. She ripped it open, pages crumbling under her distressed grasp. Scrawled handwriting filled the pages, some entries stained with ominous red splatters. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears as she read snippets, twisted experiments, unholy acts committed under the veil of secrecy. The name of the Vatican echoed throughout, a dark stain on history intertwined with her own family. Stop! She shouted, more to the figure than to herself. She glanced back only to find it stepping closer, its shape contorting, revealing grotesque features hidden in the dark. Unlock the truth, sweet Sarah, it crooned, the voice now dripping with sickly sweetness, or it will unlock you. A deafening silence swallowed her cries as a terrible clarity dawned. This wasn't just about her mother. This was a horrifying legacy, one her family had been entangled in long before she drew her first breath. But the key in her pocket, it wasn't just for doors, it was a key to the past, to the truths buried beneath layers of familial lies. With shaking hands, she reached for the key, flickering realization dancing at the edges of dread. Would it open a way to salvation or deliver her into the jaws of terror? Sarah, the figure whispered again, but her focus sharpened. She needed to take that chance, to step into the darkness, armed with nothing but a key, a shard, and her unwillingness to lose everything. With a deep breath, she faced the figure and demanded, "What do I need to unlock?" There was a long pause, and the air thickened around her as the shadows erupted in a cacophony of laughter. Only the first step to your own unraveling, and with that, the shadows lunged forward, dragging her deeper into the darkness. What awaited her in the abyss? Could she emerge from this nightmare unscathed? Would courage be enough to confront the horrors that had tainted her lineage? The path to salvation flickered somewhere within the darkness, but the truth seemed far more dangerous than she imagined. The darkness enveloped Sarah, a thick shroud that swallowed sound and light. She felt herself falling, tumbling through an abyss where time held no meaning. The chills seeped deeper into her bones, a reminder that the malevolent presence was with her, lurking just out of sight. "Fight it, Sarah!" a voice echoed, a distant whisper tinged with urgency. It barely reached her through the suffocating gloom, but she knew it was her own will, battling against the encroaching despair. Suddenly she landed hard on a cold, stone floor. A low, persistent hum resonated all around her. As she pushed herself up, her fingertips brushed against something wet. She recoiled, the metallic scent of blood filling her nostrils, thick and cloying. She wiped her hands on her clothes, panic rising as the weight of her surroundings sank in. The chamber was vast, lined with ancient pillars that stretched upwards like the skeletal remains of a forgotten world. A mosaic of colored glass flickered intermittently from afar, revealing scenes of nameless figures, tormented and twisted, telling the story of sorrow and suffering. Shadows flickered in their midst, writhing as if alive. Sarah's throat tightened. Was this a vision, a warning of what lay ahead? With a deep, shuddering breath, she moved forward. Step by step, she felt the air grow heavier, charged with a sinister energy. She thought of the journal, the promises it made, the truths it exposed. The key pulsed against her hip, like an anxious heartbeat waiting to unearth something buried within the darkness. A sudden sound jerked her from her thoughts, the scrape of metal clawing against stone. Heart pounding, she turned just in time to see the figure emerge again. This time, it stepped into a beam of light. The grotesque features made her stomach twist. It was a collage of horror, with skin stretched tight over bone and a mouth that twisted into a grin. "Did you think you could run from the past?" it mocked, its voice echoing through the chamber like a twisted melody. "Leave me alone!" she shouted, defiance slipping between labored breaths. The figure's eyes gleamed with something like amusement. "You're already ensnared, dear Sarah. Just a few more secrets, and the truth will envelop you fully." It leaned closer, the stench of decay enveloping her like a noose. She could feel its breath upon her skin, icy as death itself. In that moment, she remembered the key. Heart racing, she turned towards the end of the chamber where a massive door loomed, its surface marred by age and entropy. If this was indeed the door to her family's darkest secrets, she had to unlock it. She could almost see the keyhole, glinting like a beacon in the shadow. With trembling hands, she pulled the key from her pocket, the metal cool and heavy in her palm. Patience. You'll find what you seek, the figure taunted, retreating back into the shadows, its laughter echoing as it vanished from view. She pressed the key against the door, feeling for the lock, nearly overwhelmed by dread. She couldn't sense what awaited her beyond that thick wood. Fortitude surged within her. She turned the key, and a satisfying click resounded in the stillness. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow passage, dimly lit and lined with rows of glass containers, each one holding something dark and unholy. The silhouettes within contorted, visible only through layers of grime and decay. Something curious flared within her, a desperate, hopeless need to search. "What have you gotten yourself into?" she muttered, her voice wavering. As the last flicker of hesitation left her, she stepped inside. The air grew heavy with an oppressive dread, charged by unknown forces. Every instinct urged her to retreat, but curiosity bound her in place. And then she heard it, a voice whispering amidst the glass, weaving secrets that dripped with promise and peril. "Sarah, come closer." Was this the knowledge she sought, or yet another trick of the darkness? The question loomed like a specter. With her heart racing dangerously, she leaned closer, drawn in by the sinister allure. What terrible discovery awaited her behind those glass barriers? Could she unlock not just the door but also her family's buried sins? The truth was closer than ever, but so was danger. And with every heartbeat, the shadows began to stir once more, hungry for her curiosity. As Sarah stepped further into the dim passage, her breath quickened. The whisper echoed, slithering into her ears, wrapping around her thoughts like a serpent. She traced her fingers along the cool surfaces of the glass containers, each one a tomb of forgotten horrors or unholy treasures. "Sarah, it's all here." The pain, the truth, the voice was honeyed but cruel, dripping with the sweet terror that made her skin crawl. It beckoned her, and she felt herself inching closer to the first container. She squinted through the filth, trying to make out the form trapped within. Suddenly, she recoiled as a face emerged, twisted in eternal agony, eyes wide, mouth frozen in a silent scream. Her heart raced. Was this a victim of the experiments whispered in her family's history? Who had been forsaken here? "Don't look away. You must know," the voice urged, more insistent now. "These are your ancestors' sins, Sarah, their betrayals." She shook her head violently, forcing herself to move down the line of containers. Each one held grotesque figures, contorted in long-forgotten terror. Bodies were strung together by wires, faces stretched into nightmarish grins. The stench of decay clawed at her throat, making her gag. "What have they done?" she whispered to herself, desperation clawing at her. "What have you done?" The shadows whispered back, wrapping their fingers around her conscience. With each step, she felt something deep within her an unease. It wasn't merely fear, it was a tightening chain of guilt, binding her to the legacy of pain these tortured souls represented. In a moment of defiance, she shouted, "No! I refuse to be part of this." The darkness responded with torrents of laughter, echoing off the stone walls like a macabre symphony. "Refusal is a luxury you cannot afford, dear Sarah. You are already entangled, and the truth demands payment." She stumbled backward, her heart hammering. Was this haunting figure in the darkness right? Had her family turned a blind eye to their own sins? But before she could process her spiraling thoughts, the whisper ignited. "Look, Sarah." Look deeper. Against her better judgment, she turned. The last container glimmered faintly, its glass surprisingly clean amidst the grime. Buildings of horror flashed before her eyes as she dared to approach. Just as she pressed her face against the glass, a jarring crack shook the chamber. The sound resonated, like thunder within the bowels of the earth, causing the containers to shudder. Sarah's breath caught. The glass before her shattered, exploding outward in a volley of shards. She barely had time to react, throwing herself aside as jagged pieces glittered in the darkness, raining down like knives. As she lay on the cold floor, a figure emerged from the wreckage. It was the figure from the shadows, melding with the chaos of the glass. It came alive, hands reaching out, eyes glowing. "Welcome, Sarah. Your true journey begins here," it rasped, every word dripping with malice. She struggled to her feet, adrenaline coursing through her veins, panic roaring in her ears. "Why are you doing this?" But the figure only grinned, revealing teeth that looked far sharper than a human S should ever be. "To unearth the truth, to embrace the darkness, it's what your bloodline craves." A chill swept through her. What if they truly had summoned this evil? What if this was her inheritance? As the shadows writhed around her like restless spirits, she knew she had to escape, but the doorway was gone. Panic set in. She backed away, searching for an exit, but the chamber twisted around her. "Sarah, stay with us." "It's too late to turn back." She turned to run, but the walls closed in, whispering secrets and promises as the darkness thickened. Each breath became more labored as despair wrapped around her like cold fingers. "Time is ticking, Sarah. Will you uncover the curse, or will it consume you whole?" With no clear path, Sarah gritted her teeth, determined to uncover the truth, even if it meant facing her deepest fears. But as she looked back at the figure, a rush of doubt flooded her. Maybe some truths were never meant to be unearthed. The question loomed, would she unlock the legacy of torment, or would the darkness swallow her whole? Each heartbeat urged her onward, but the shadows pressed ever closer, ready to claim their next prize. The darkness roared around Sarah, echoing with mockery and disdain, but the primal spark of a mother's love surged through her. She couldn't succumb. She wouldn't let her son's voice fade into the abyss. With an iron grip on the brass key, her heartbeat thudded like a war drum, urging her to thrust forward into the remnants of terror long buried. "Show yourself!" she cried defiantly, the echo of her voice bouncing off the walls, threatening the shadows that hung in anticipation. The figure that haunted her was lurking nearby, its presence a sickly reminder of her family's dark past. She could feel fear wrapping around her like a serpent, but resolve pushed her forward. "Your time is at an end, dear Sarah," the figure hissed, slithering into her line of sight. Its eyes glowed, acerbic and twisted, promising nothing but an agonizing descent into madness. "No more!" Her voice held strength she didn't know she possessed. With every ounce of willpower, she pointed the key toward the darkness, as if it were a weapon. "Tell me, what must I unlock?" Suddenly, memories flooded her mind, fleeting images of her mother, kneeling beside her, whispering warnings, ache of pain etched deep into her soul. "Face the truth!" surged like an electric shock in her veins. It was time. The air grew heavy with urgency, as if the echoes of the past demanded absolution. She searched the warped surroundings for an answer, for a lock that would shed the weight of years spent entangled in fear. And then she saw it, barely visible against the damp stone, a faint outline, glimmering with latent power. With trembling hands she approached. The shadows trembled in anger, swallowing the light around her. Pressing the key into the lock, she hesitated. What if this is a mistake? But the weight of her childhood disasters loomed heavy on her shoulders, and she couldn't afford to turn back. The key slipped inside, locking her to her family's fate. A click echoed loudly, reverberating through the silence like a gunshot. With a deep breath, she turned the key. The door creaked open, revealing an expansive room filled with glass containers lined against the walls, each containing remnants of things long forgotten, twisted shapes, horrifying experiments shielded from the world, ghosts of the past wrapped in a web of deception. "It's all here," whispered the haunting voice, a chorus of sinister secrets. "Your legacy, your bloodline, everything. They made their choices, now you make yours." Tremors threatened to shake her resolve, but determination swelled. She stepped forward, gazing at the figures trapped in anguish, their faces stretching in perpetual agony. This was her family's ghastly past, staring back at her. With each breath she took in the air tainted by despair, she could feel the weight pressing down, mocking her attempts to escape. "No!" she shouted, clutching the key tightly. I want to repeat their sins. The air thickened with darkness, swirling like a storm around her, but Sarah focused on the flicker of hope that glimmered inside her heart. If she didn't confront it, who would? Stop this! Roared a disembodied voice overlapping with the shadows. You can't change what's been done. But Sarah felt the key pulse with power. I can change my path. She countered fiercely, tapping into a primal instinct that screamed for liberation. The walls shook, tremors rumbling beneath her feet as remnants of lost souls screamed in rage. With every ounce of will, she fought the darkness while pushing toward the source. She was a barrier, a firewall between what had been and what could be. She thrust herself into the darkest shadow, focusing on the chain of her family's sins that snaked around her heart. No more sacrifices! She cried, her voice erupting through the chaos. The figures seemed to writhe, the containers rattling violently as they became frenzied with energy. In a moment of clarity, she envisioned her son, safe and sound. I fight for him. I'll rewrite this legacy. With her heart pounding like thunder, she drove the key into the nearest container, willing herself to face whatever horror lay inside. The glass shattered, and a blinding light burst forth, cleansing the dark room. The screams of torment turned into roars of purging fire enveloping the shadows. Light surged, engulfing everything, and for a brief moment Sarah felt free. The light swept through her, including the horrors. It tore the darkness apart, stripping everything down to essence, unshackled anguish and unfettered hope clashing like wildfires. The shadows screeched as they dissipated, histories yelled of anguish and betrayal but were finally indelibly severed, and then silence fell. Breathless, Sarah opened her eyes, peering through the settling dust. She was standing alone in a barren room, the evidence of torment wiped clean. The moonlight slipped through cracked windows, illuminating the emptiness where darkness once thrived. Mommy? Jimmy's soft voice cut through the tranquility, so innocent yet wrapped in poignant relief. He stood just outside the doorway, wide-eyed yet unharmed. Jimmy! She rushed to him, wrapping him in her arms. You're safe. Tears streamed down her face, washing away the dread of countless nights consumed by terror. As the first rays of dawn broke through the shattered remnants of betrayal, she knew they were free. The haunting would no longer follow them. They could carve a new path, basking in the dawn of a future untainted by the past. This time, they would write their own story. With one last look at the remnants of darkness, Sarah led Jimmy into the morning light, resolve etched deep in her heart. She would nurture love, laughter, and hope, forever vigilant of their past, yet united against its grasp. As they stepped beyond the threshold of that cursed place, she swore they would never be bound again. Don't wait another second. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you won't miss out on exclusive stories like this. Smash the like button now to help us with the algorithm. Your support means everything. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. Share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need this conclusion in their lives. You need to show your support today. This is your moment.